All right, I think we can start, and then if some more people join, they will just catch on. So, hello everyone and welcome. My name is Mylin, and I'm speaking on behalf of White Plus, a European feminist network working for social justice, women's rights, and transnational solidarity. We're very grateful to have you here today for this very important conversation. This webinar is a broader feminist initiative, which its goal is to amplify voices that are too often sidelined, such as the voices of women who are actively resisting war, repression, and exile, and who are building alternatives based on care, memory, justice, and peace. So we're gathering in a time of, as you all know, extreme urgency and pain, from the devastation in Gaza to the crackdown and dissent in Iran to the rise of militarism in Israel and all across the globe. Today, we're honored to be joined by a remarkable group of speakers, women whose work bridge activism, art, scholarships, and lived experiences. So I will quickly say their name now and introduce them a bit more later, before each of their presentation. So we have with us Dr. Elena Stockman. I'm sorry, I'm not saying that right. Dr. Elena
Stockman is great. Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you, Lana.
Yeah.
Dr. Elena Kleibo-Kogan, Ida Kleibo, and Farvaz Farvadin. Throughout this webinar, we'll hear from each of our speakers in turn, and then open the floor to a collective discussion and audience questions. If you want to ask a question or comment on something, you can use the chat section at the bottom of your panel. You can also use that if you would like to share your work pertaining to this webinar especially. In the hope that we have enough time for all questions, we will also facilitate a live contribution from the audience. So if you want to take the floor later on and ask your question through audio and or video, please let us know in the question so that we can ask you later. And finally, we kindly ask you that you approach this conversation with openness, respect, and care for one another, especially as we're dealing with deeply painful and politically charged realities. So thank you all again for being here, and let's begin. We'll begin with a presentation by Ida Kleibo, which Ida is a Palestinian gender equality and human rights advocate from the illegally annexed eastern part of Jerusalem. She currently works to advance rights-based practices within the Palestinian healthcare system in Jerusalem, with a focus on integrating gender equality, protecting patient and staff dignity, and challenging system discrimination. She's actively building a comprehensive support system for survivors of gender-based violence, alongside reforms in policy, infrastructure, HR, equity, and social norms. Thank you, Ida. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I speak to you today not from a place of safety or distance, but from the front lines of a decades-long system of institutionalized violence, legal erasure, and gendered warfare. I am a Palestinian woman from occupied and illegally annexed East Jerusalem, a city where the law is not a shield, but a weapon. Here, the system is built not to protect us, but to erase us. It reduces us to an Arab minority, stripping away our political identity. But we are not just Arabs, we are Palestinians. These laws control every part of our lives, from zoning restrictions that prevent us from building on our own lands, to an education system that channels us, women and men, into gendered low-wage labor. This is no accident. It is a structure engineered to contain us, essential yet disposable, allowed to serve but never to shape. This oppression is institutionally administered, legislated, and gendered. It limits our agency and autonomy, especially as women confronting the intersecting forces of patriarchy, colonialism, and occupation. What has been happening for the past 77 years in Jerusalem, Gaza, the occupied territories, and 1948 Palestine is not a conflict. It is a deliberate, ongoing process of ethnic cleansing designed to dismantle our communities, erase our identity, and remove us from our land. Nowhere is gendered colonial violence more calculated than in the use of isqat, a tactic designed to silence, isolate, and dismantle Palestinian women's resistance from within. It targets women's perceived morality rather than their actions, eroding their credibility and severing them from community support. It is rooted in both colonial and patriarchal logics. Isqat functions as a form of gendered counterinsurgency. This tactic is not unique to Palestine. Across liberation movements from French-occupied Algeria to the Black civil rights movement in the US, both UK and US suffragette movements, sexualized defamation has been used to sideline politically active women and fracture resistance. In Palestine, Isqat was systematically deployed by the Israeli occupation, particularly during the First Intifada, as women organized schools, led committees, and sustained mass mobilization. Israeli intelligence responded with moral attacks, entrapment, rumor, baseless accusations of collaboration or impropriety. In a context governed by honor codes, even a whisper could be a sentence. To be labeled saqita, fallen, was to be exiled while still alive. Some factions tried to resist with slogans like al-ard qabla al-ard, which means land before honor, trying to challenge patriarchal norms, but the impact was deep. Women were removed from leadership, erased from memory, and the national movement was weakened from within. Its effects still echo today, in the absence of women's voices from political life and public memory. Isqat revealed what we have always known. The liberation of Palestinian women is inseparable from the liberation of Palestine. But Isqat is only one tool in a broader arsenal. The occupation understands that domination requires more than political suppression. It extends into homes, families, and intimate life. There is perhaps no clearer example of how Israel legislates domination than the ban on family reunification. Enacted in 2003, it was initially framed as a temporary security measure, an emergency response to the Second Intifada. But for nearly 2 decades, that emergency was extended again and again, until it was formally codified into law in 2022. That moment unmasked its true purpose, not security, but demography. The law blocks Palestinians from the West Bank and Gaza from living with their spouses in Jerusalem or 1948 Palestine. It is not a security policy. It is a demographic weapon designed to fragment Palestinian families and preserve a Jewish majority. While this law impacts men as well, it inflicts a particular kind of violence on women. Because under it, a Palestinian woman from the West Bank's legal right to live in Jerusalem is tied to her marriage. Her status, her residency, her access to healthcare, her ability to exist depends not on her as a person, but on the endurance of her marriage. And when that marriage becomes toxic, abusive, violent, she has a choice no one should ever have to make. Stay and suffer abuse to retain your legal status and your children's custody, or leave and lose your legal right to stay in Jerusalem and lose custody of your children. This is not hypothetical. It is state-sanctioned gender-based violence, codified in law and enforced through silence. And the violence doesn't end there. Under Israeli Ministry of Interior policies, if a woman's husband dies or they divorce, she may lose custody of her children. This is the case if she has a West Bank ID and he is from Jerusalem. Her role as a mother, her right to stay with her children, is not protected. It is conditional, contingent, and revocable. If she is from Jerusalem and her husband is from the West Bank, she needs to give birth in Jerusalem so her child will be documented. But when that time comes and her labor begins and her husband is barred from entering Jerusalem due to the ban, she gives birth alone, left to endure postpartum pain, trauma, and newborn care without her partner. To live under this law is to have your most intimate decisions, where you live, who you marry, whether your child exists in the eyes of the state, governed by an occupying power. It is colonial governance over love, reproduction, and survival. It exemplifies intersectional violence, where Israeli apartheid and Palestinian patriarchy collide, and it is women who are crushed in between. And yet, where is the outcry? Where are the governments to claim to defend human rights? Where are the feminists who say, believe women, but can't seem to believe Palestinian women? Because to speak about this, to name it, means admitting that Palestinian women are not free, not only because of their culture, but because of the structures imposed upon them by a settler colonial regime. And it reveals again how gendered oppression and settler colonialism are not parallel structures, but the same machinery. In 2024, I helped lead a project called Women in Isolation. It was born out of a simple question. What does this law feel like? Not in legal language, but in words, bodies, and memories of the women who endure it. We gave women cameras, journals, and one another. It did not speak for them. It created space for them to speak back. It culminated in a powerful exhibition of photographs and testimonies, a living archive of resilience in the face of erasure. This was not charity. It was not storytelling for empathy. It was resistance. Because when the law tries to erase you, documenting your very existence becomes revolutionary. Let me share a few of these stories, each one ordinary and each one extraordinary. My daughter was 2, just learning to walk. One day she fell and hit her head on the bed's edge. Blood everywhere. I was alone. I called my husband. We had to get her to the hospital, but I couldn't go. My permit allowed me to live in Jerusalem, but not to leave my house. I was legally caged, not because I committed a crime, but because I'm from the West Bank and my husband is a Jerusalemite. So I swallowed my fear and sent my bleeding toddler with her father and grandfather. I stayed behind, helpless, eyes glued to the clock, heart breaking. My husband called from the hospital. I followed her condition over the phone, speaking to her, calming her, weeping for her, and for the cruelty of this life. When she came home, I hugged her, sobbing, and I knew I had been stronger than the system designed to crush me. Another woman's testimony. I got married when I was just a little girl with no real understanding of life beyond the ideas of love, marriage, and family. I stepped into a world I didn't know, full of hope, but I never imagined that my identity, my very existence, would be treated as a threat simply because I carry a West Bank ID while my husband holds a Jerusalem one. Suddenly, my life was no longer my own. I was trapped, unable to go out, attend family gatherings, or even take part in simple celebrations. I watched from behind closed doors as my husband's family went out, laughed, and lived. And I remained inside, invisible, forgotten. Fear consumed me. I became terrified to step outside my home. Even my own neighborhood felt dangerous. I lived in constant dread that I would be arrested, sent back to the West Bank, or worse, that my presence would endanger my husband. I was made to feel like a criminal for falling in love, for wanting a life, for simply existing. These women are not exceptions. They are not symbols. They are documentarians of occupation. In a system built to isolate them, they dare to narrate themselves. And in doing so, they turn survival into resistance. And they are living proof that the Palestinian struggle is not only fought in the streets or the courts, but in homes, hospitals, schools, and in stories. And if Women in Isolation revealed how the occupation fractures us in silence, Gaza is where that fracture becomes a mass grave. What we are witnessing is not just indiscriminate violence. It is a gendered, racialized strategy of erasure. Palestinian women are not only killed as civilians, they are targeted as life bearers. Israeli occupation forces have bombed homes, hospitals, maternity wards, and fertility clinics. This is not just the destruction of life, but of the capacity to create it. Even pregnancy offers no protection when the womb is Palestinian. In Gaza, women have sold their urine so others could pretend to be pregnant, because some aid only reaches expectant mothers. But to the occupier, Palestinian biology itself is a demographic threat. And even in our death, our humanity is ranked. International law and UN frameworks define innocent civilians in ways that prioritize women and children, while Palestinian men are cast outside that category, dehumanized, not presumed innocent, not presumed civilian. They are rendered ungrievable, unprotected, as if their lives are inherently violent, inherently expendable. They are stripped, blindfolded, paraded as terrorists, filmed on their knees. Their existence is not seen as human, but as a threat. This is not incidental, it is systemic. And I say this as someone once shaped by Western feminism, taught that centering women was enough, but it is not. Feminism that does not confront militarism, colonialism, and racial hierarchy is not feminism. A feminism that mourns a girl's lost classroom, but not the boy bombed before he could learn how to read. That grieves a child but ignores the father caged without trial. That is not feminism. Feminism is not pink-washed missiles. It is not silence. It is not performance. Feminism is abolition. It is anti-colonial. It is Palestinian. From Gaza to Jerusalem, Palestinian women resist not only occupation, but the layered violence of patriarchy, poverty, and global abandonment. We have been silenced by the settler colonial states, by religious conservatives, by donor frameworks, by feminists who find our struggle too political, too complicated, too inconvenient. But our lives have always been political. Our grief, our resistance, our survival, politicized, because they threaten a system that was never meant to see us as fully human. And yet, we remain, telling our stories, driving across checkpoints, raising children in exile, smuggling light through borders, burying our dead and rising again, not because we are strong, but because we are not allowed to be weak. So what does feminist solidarity look like in the face of genocide? It must go beyond empathy, beyond statements and slogans. It must be political. Feminist solidarity begins by listening to the most silenced, to Palestinian women and men, the imprisoned and erased, to Iranian women defying theocracy and the men who stand beside them, to Israelis who reject militarism and refuse to serve in an occupying army, not as symbols, but as political actors in shared struggle. It must mean that Israeli feminists who march for LGBTQ+ rights and democracy also march against apartheid, naming the occupation and refusing to let genocide be carried out in their names. That Iranian feminists stand with Palestinians not from pity, but from shared resistance, and that Western feminists confront the violence of the states they live in, states that fund bombs, silence our grief, and criminalize our resistance. Because gender justice is inseparable from racial justice, decolonization, and the right to exist. And the end of this genocide will not mark the beginning of peace. Because before the bombs fell, we were not living in peace. There is no peace that ignores the Nakba, no peace that erases decades of siege, displacement, surveillance, and humiliation. Without truth, there is no justice. And without justice, there is no peace, only silence. And silence has never been freedom. We are not asking for symbolic sisterhood. We are demanding political solidarity, a solidarity that risks something, that confronts power, that calls for divestment, for resistance, for truth. A solidarity that says, feminism without Palestine is not feminism. Liberation built on the backs of the colonized is not liberation. And freedom that comes at the expense of our lives is not freedom. And until Palestine is free, none of us are free. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aida. That was very moving, very touching, and thank you for everything you've taught us and for your very inspiring words. Now we're going to hear from Dr. Elana Stockman, which is a Jewish Israeli American anthropologist, educator, and award-winning author. She's the founder of the podcast Women Ending War, which gives voice to women working for peace in conflict zones. And she's a longtime peace activist in Israel. Thank you, Elena, for being here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you for having me. And Aida, thank you so much for sharing your very painful experiences. Thanks for being in dialogue with me and being present with me and trusting that I can hold space for this. I don't take that for granted. And so I just want to express my gratitude for that. So I'm going to share my PowerPoint, okay? Okay. Yeah. Hang on. Okay, so today I want to talk about Israeli feminist resistance to the war in Israel. In response, just not in response, but as an extension of what I was talking about, you placed a challenge to women like me, Israeli Jewish feminists, and I'm listening. I chose to take this angle to my talk today because when we met last week, I realized that there are a lot of people who don't even know that we exist, that there are Israeli feminist movements. And so I want us to be seen too, just as, I want to see you. I would just want to say to you, Aida, I'm seeing you. I see you. I hear you. I feel your pain. And I'm here. I can't speak for everybody. I really can only speak for myself and my own lived experiences mostly. And so I want to share that today. But I do want to say before I start that this talk is in no way any kind of attempt to like whitewash Israelis, okay? I'm not trying to say here like, oh, look how great Israelis are, okay? It's not that, just so we understand, it's clear. I'm here just to shine a spotlight on a particular phenomenon that apparently a lot of people don't know exists. And again, I'm not even going to try to say that the feminist movement is perfect and great, because a lot of your criticism, Aida, is legitimate and there. I mean, it's there. So I want to get to that. Okay, so without any more, just a minute to tell you who I am, where I come from. I grew up in New York in religious Zionism. I was totally educated into religious Zionism. I was very religious for most of my life. Not most of my life at this point. I'm 55, so I guess it's not so much anymore. But I came out of that. It was a process of unlearning, of letting go of all of that indoctrination and the dehumanization of the other, and all the things that you described, Aida, about, how we talk to and about Palestinians and all of that. So I wrote a book about this during the war, and it just came out in January. And so I tell the whole story about that process, about what it took to unlearn the process of dehumanization of the other. And my goal is to try to encourage others who come from, the same kinds of cultures that I came from, to talk back to their cultures and to undo that and to unlearn the indoctrination. And so I feel like I have some tools for that. And I've spent a lot of the war sort of dedicating myself to that, to try to challenge my own people, the people that to unlearn all that. And the other thing that I started during the war was the podcast, the Women Ending War podcast. This is my current co-host. Her name is Amir Musalam. She's a very dear friend. She lives in Beit Jala. And before Amira, we're in our fourth season. I was doing it with Eva Dalak, who's a Palestinian originally from Jaffa. She currently lives in Costa Rica. Also, she calls herself a peace activator. She doesn't believe in the word peace activism. She says peace needs to be activated. Anyway, so and we've been interviewing Palestinian and Israeli women, and they're all inspiring in their own ways, and each one dedicating her life to doing this work in all different ways. Anyway, you can follow us on YouTube and Spotify and all those other things. And I encourage you to join the conversation. Okay, so Israeli feminism. So Israeli feminism in the peace movement has certain core values, which I know because a lot of groups and forums spend a lot of time hashing out these values, and it's not always easy, right? So at the core of the values are the ones that I was talking about, which you say, it can't just be spoken, it has to be lived, but there are these values of democracy, equality, and also, of course, value of life, key, as opposed to violence and militarism. For me, this is one of the core values, is the idea of all human beings are human beings, as opposed to tribalism, which is the way I was brought up, as opposed to saying, well, the blood of my people matters, the blood of other people doesn't matter, which is a lot of what we see, a lot of what you were describing. So this is also at the core of the different movements. I don't want to say movement because it's not one movement, it's various movements. Also, one of the things that the feminist movements have in common is women's leadership, okay? That women can bring other values of compassion, empathy, and humanity. It doesn't mean that women always do, just so we're clear about this, okay? This is not an all women are like that kind of situation. We know it's not that situation, but it's a belief that women around the table can bring different values. It's also a belief that there are long-term solutions, because a lot of times we hear from our leaders, oh, there are no solutions, there are no partners for peace. Enemies, I hear this all the time, about these eternal enemies. Netanyahu talks about Palestinians as 3,000-year-old enemies. I mean, we actually just recorded a podcast about this. Anyway, okay, so these are our belief systems, and of course, commitment to shared society and a shared future. And this last one, it's about the idea of rewriting the story so that it's not like in us and them. It's about all of us as human beings. That's at the core. Okay, and of course, this is at the center. One of these shared issues is that there are no women involved in decision making. So at the very least, this is that. Okay. Since the beginning of the war, there have been probably a dozen new women's feminist organizations that have formed, each one with like sometimes slightly different angles to them, slightly different nuances, sometimes bigger than slightly, let's say. Okay, now before the war started, there were already peace movements, like we have Mothers Against Violence in Israel, and there's the Daily File, my friend Adi Argov, who's an amazing, wow, she's like a one-woman uh, war against the war, let's say. She runs this website called the Daily File, where she's just collecting data. Before the war, she was focused mostly on the occupation of the West Bank and Gaza, of the West Bank actually mostly, and then since the war, she's focused a lot, almost entirely right now, on Gaza. And her job is to collect names and dates and numbers and faces. Really, really important. I highly recommend following her on social media. There's also Women Wage Peace, which began in 2014, which is evolved. It's a very big organization now. They've got, I don't know, 50,000 members or something. And they've evolved. Now, and then there's the new organizations. There's an organization called the Mother's Cry, Zakata Imahot. There's also Mothers Awake, Imai Rights. It's hard to translate. It could be, Imai could also be Mother is Awake, grammatically. So sometimes I translate it Mother Awake or Mother is Awake. Then there's a relatively new one called Setu, which is an offshoot of one of them, which it's like comes from a sense of like increasing frustration that even the feminist movements aren't doing enough. There's also parents of soldiers. Okay, so this is specifically Israeli mothers, which actually they used to be mothers, now they're mothers and fathers. They changed their name to include men, and this is specifically parents of soldiers who are trying to end the war. There's also Forum 1325, which I'm a member of, and I did a lot of strategic planning with, which is a coalition of Palestinian and Israeli peace activists from I don't know 24 different organizations, working in particular to try to get women into decision-making positions. And there's also relatively, well, actually, it's not new anymore. It's probably like a year old, probably, which is Women in White, which is very into nonviolent resistance. They try to up the game and try to do things like sit-ins. Their first meeting was a 2 or 3 hour session, what to do if you get arrested. So it's kind of like a whole other. Anyway, so these are just some of them. There are more. Okay, and then of course there are other organizations that are mixed. There are a lot of organizations that have been working very hard to have both two women, Israeli and Palestinian women as co-heads, or Israeli and Palestinian in general. Combatants for Peace has 2 women heads. It's a binational organization. Aled for All also is a binational organization with two women leaders, one Israeli and one Palestinian. Standing Together has 2 leaders. One is a Jewish Israeli man and one is a Palestinian woman. So these are organizations that are playing with diversity and playing with ideas of partnership, what that looks like, which is newish, okay? Because, in previous wars where there were, peace movements, the peace movements of the past weren't quite as attuned to issues of representation, for example. Also, nonviolent communication is women-led. The Parents Bereavement Circle is 50-50 led. And in general, it's worth noting that 75% of leadership, of like practical leadership in peace groups, are women. So that on the ground, even though the leaders are still predominantly men, the top tier, I should say, the top tier of decision makers are men. On the ground, in grassroots organizations, it's very, very female dominated. Now, and I think the most important organization to know, it's an organization that I love. I really love the people involved. It's ALMEP, which is a coalition of 180 organizations, Palestinian organizations, Israeli organizations, and binational organizations that are all dedicated to peace and all with different strategies, some different ideologies and all of that, but all dedicated to this same issue of peace. And they just launched in April the Women's Leadership Forum, and that's exciting. It's just it's a piece of optimism. Okay, so now I want to talk about October 7th, not because I know what I just said, which is that, this didn't all start on October 7th. And my partner, Eva Dalek, on my podcast says this all the time on the podcast. Every time October 7th comes up, she says, no, October 7th didn't start on October 7th. It started in 1947, maybe even earlier. So all of that is true. But I want to talk about October 7th as a moment of shift because of how much feminist awakening there's happening since then, and because I think something has changed in the feminist circle in Israel since then. So on from October 7th, it didn't happen right away. Okay, so let me just put this out there. I'm starting here with January 24, which is about 3 months after October 7th. And that's because, at the beginning, right after October 7th, we were all sort of in shock. It was too much. It was too much to sort of start fighting back right away, even though I was already writing. I mean, I started to write about what's happening in Gaza almost immediately, but getting organized took a couple of months. And also, for instance, two of my daughters were displaced on October 7th. My daughter was living near Gaza at the time. She lived in Ashkelon, and she showed up at my house on October 7th in the morning with her 3-month-old baby and said, we're under attack. And she had to drive through all kinds of like scary things in order to get to my house. And she showed up and stayed for about 3 months. My other daughter also lived in the South, and she showed up with her children. And so I spent a lot of time just in grandmother mode and also just absorbing what happened. And I think a lot of people were in that phase for a while. So it took a while, a couple of months. And also nobody knew exactly how long this was going to last. And then there was the issue of the hostages, of 250 hostages, which was like a lot to wrap your head around. And it was new. And so I'm going to start here from January 24. Already in January, women were starting to get organized, okay? Because that's around the time when we started to realize, okay, something here is happening. It looks like it's going to be long-term, and it looks like it's going to be very, very violent. And we really have to speak up now, despite our pain, despite our own trauma, despite our own issues. We had to speak up. And there were already some organizations like here, the women in the movement of democratic women in Israel. They're an organization that's been around almost 100 years, up north. Up north, by the way, is one of the places where shared society is a little bit ahead of the rest of Israel. Anyway, so around January, there start to be beginnings of movements. This sign says "Women Against the War." So that's not the name of any organization. That's just a statement of what they were. And then some organizations started to form. I found this picture that said November 23, but I actually don't think it was November 23. I don't think that this organization existed in November 23. I think it was later. And I remember this protest, and I think it was a few months later. But anyway, okay. So this is an organization called Women at the Front. Or sorry, not women, Mothers at the Front. And you see that they're in front of a hospital, and they're protesting the war with this very like graphic picture of these are coffins, right? They're baby carriages / coffins. So what's interesting here is, first of all, that they're playing on their motherhood thing, which is a big part of feminist resistance to war. But it's also a little bit controversial because not all women are mothers, and also also some women don't like being reduced to mothers, reduced in the sense of like that we deserve to have a say, not just because we're mothers. On the other hand, a lot of the protests do come from this issue of like people should listen to mothers. Anyway, so that's one point about this, about the power of using motherhood as a tool, the power of the perspective of motherhood as a place of compassion and empathy, but also the problematics of it sometimes. Anyway, but motherhood has been a very big theme in this particular opposition. But here also you notice there's a lot of Israeli flags, and this organization is not particularly diverse. It's a mostly Israeli organization, so there's also that. Oh, here's a picture of me. So I wanted to show you this picture. Now, the first protests in Israel were mostly around hostages, right? The hostage protests were like the first major protests. Hundreds of thousands of people were protesting in Tel Aviv. So that's something that most Israelis were really focused on. And I spoke to a lot of people who were so focused on the hostages. And if you talked about Gaza, they would be like, I can't think about Gaza, which is troubling. You still hear that. People are like, well, it's all about the hostages. It's not about Gaza. So from the beginning, this was February. This was towards the beginning. I never talked about the hostages without also talking about Gaza, having to end the war in Gaza. And I think that even though I don't think that at the time that was a mainstream position, I think that it has become the mainstream position in Israel today. Polls this week say that 82% of Israelis want to end the war and to get the hostages home as like one package. So I think that that might be something that we could say that the feminist movement maybe had an impact on, in terms of like saying, you know, it's not just about us, it's also about people that you can't necessarily see. I also want to say that some of the hostage families have been the most vocal in talking about how important it is for Israel to stop bombing the hell out of Gaza. We've heard that from a few hostage families. And I don't know if you followed this story when the parents of Hirsch, Pollen Goldberg, who was a hostage, an American citizen, his parents are American, and they spoke at the Democratic National Convention before, you know, in last July or August, like about a month before he was killed in captivity. And it was a very controversial thing because the Democratic Party would not let any Palestinians speak. And it was like really, I mean, it's a big reason why, you know, a lot of Palestinians are angry at Democrats. But they got up there, and John Pollan, who was there to advocate to get his son back, you know, you could sort of like forgive hostage parents for having no ability to think about anything other than their child. I mean, that's sort of like a natural thing, but they didn't do that. He got up there at the Democratic National Convention and said, please bring Hirsch back and also stop bombing innocent Palestinians in Gaza. He said that. And what's interesting to me is that a lot of what we're seeing, if you like follow these nuances, is that a lot of the advocates for ending all of that killing, a lot of the advocates are hostage families. So, you know, you can interpret that in a lot of different ways. I find myself interpreting it as a cry for empathy. And that once, you know, hostage parents are saying, you know, please have empathy for my child. Once you say that, and then you hear another parent who's saying, please have empathy for my child, boom, there's like a connection. That's what I think. I don't have any proof of that. It's just totally my sense, and I could be totally wrong, but that's how I'm experiencing this. Anyway, okay, so right. So here we have Palestinian Jewish women in Haifa. And again, I think that what we've been seeing in the feminist movement here is that if Israelis started out just talking about the hostages, it has evolved into hostages and stop the war and get out of Gaza and end the whole thing. Again, it's this evolution is happening. Again, not everybody, but you could see this happening you could see it with signs, you could see with here. Also, even from the beginning, you see, I don't know if you could see this. It's in Hebrew. So this was the first time that Israel went into Rafah. It was a very controversial thing of escalating the war. And already here, there's a sign here that says, Knisa Rafiach Pesha Neged Enoshut. That means that going into Rafah is a crime against humanity. It's a war crime. So even back here, towards the beginning, there were already some people willing to say this is a war crime. Also here you see the sign, stop the genocide. So even though, like, you know, a lot of, like what you're saying also, Ida, that a lot of people are like reluctant to use the word genocide, use the word war crimes and things like that, ethnic cleansing, it did exist. And one of the things that I have been tracking is the growth, the expansion of the use of the word genocide, words like genocide and ethnic cleansing. And I have this conversation all the time with people, that we have to get over, we, meaning Jews and Israelis, have to get over the discomfort with using words like that, because, you know, we have our own trauma, we have our Holocaust history, and a lot of Jews are like, you can't say the word genocide, that just means the Holocaust, that's just that we're the victims of genocide, we're not the perpetrators. It's a whole internal narrative shift that Jews and Israelis have to go through in order to be able to say, yes, what's happening in Gaza are war crimes, ethnic cleansing, genocide. It's a whole big thing. But what I'm seeing is that it is shifting. Even if maybe it's not enough for some people, you know, I recently had a conversation with a man from Gaza who was really, really upset, really frustrated that there aren't more Israelis saying this. But I tried to show him that it's happening a little bit a little bit. I don't want to correct anybody, so from my perspective, it's shifting a little bit, not a lot, not anywhere near where it has to be. But from me observing feminist activism in Israel, I don't know. I think there's a little bit of more. Maybe not. If you think I'm wrong, then I hear that too.
You,
Okay,
Lana. Can you wrap up maybe?
sure. Okay, so here are just some more examples of women's protests. You see women using all kinds of tactics, not afraid of being graphic, talking about blood, also partnerships, also all kinds of tools, anything to gain attention, colors and umbrellas, art. This says Midaminot Shalom. It's a feminine version of imagining peace, and also entering a little bit of the mainstream movement. Here you have the protest. Here you have another. Oh, and talking about the occupation, I wanted to just refer to this because Aida, you also mentioned that how come Israelis aren't talking more about the occupation? There are women talking about the occupation, maybe not enough, maybe not mainstream, but it's there. It's at all the protests, the Stand the Occupation in the Eye. Here's another protest, the sit-in protest. That's the women in white that I talked about before getting arrested. And now more recently, this is Adi Argov on the left. She's the one I told you about from Daily File. She's she is nonstop fighting to talk about genocide, to talk about the killing of babies every day. And there's a weekly protest in 3 different locations in Israel where they're holding up pictures of babies from Gaza. And apparently now there are people in Gaza joining. Now there are people in Gaza holding up pictures of babies in Gaza, and also Israelis to try to show up here. This is on the Gaza border. That's one of that's one of these protests at the border with the pictures of the children. Shira Wiesel, whose picture this is, she's also a musician. She's also very active in the organization Stand the Occupation in the Eye, not nonstop talking about the occupation and also using music. Okay. Also, the Standing Together also has marches to the border. Again, here, Retach Am, this is Jerusalem. They talk about genocide. Here, starvation. This is Tel Aviv, talking about starvation as a war crime, marching, resisting genocide. And also, there's a hunger strike going on. There's been a hunger strike going on for months and months and months. And no, the last bit of resistance I want to show you is the Masai Imahot, the journey of the mothers, which is also still happening. It was happening until the war with Iran that just happened, and then it took a break for a while, and now it's happening again. It's mothers, Palestinian Israeli mothers. Okay, and right. So now, just before I finish, I just want to share with you some of the tactics that Israel has used to stomp out resistance. One is cracking down on protesters, making protests illegal, even when they shouldn't be illegal. There was no reason to make some of these illegal. And then using violence against protesters, all kinds of violence. There's a video I'm not going to play with you now, show it to you now, but there's lots of police violence against protesters. And there's a new kind of violence against women protesters of strip searching, which is a new tactic. There's a lot being written about that. You can look it up. And now, today, this is happening right now as we speak. Right now, Ayman Udeh, who's the Palestinian head of one of the Arab parties in the Israeli Knesset, is being voted on by the Knesset about whether he should be kicked out of government. And this protest happening here, each T-shirt says something else. There's one T-shirt says reporter, one says Knesset member, one says teacher, one says leftist. So there are a lot of really scary things happening in Israel. Like literally right now, there are journalists being arrested. Several journalists have been arrested in the last 2 weeks. And so these are really scare tactics. But at the same time, and I'll end with this, there are still, within all this, sources of hope. One is a whole new peace coalition. Last June, there was a massive meeting of Palestinian and Israeli peace activists in Jerusalem from Israel and from the West Bank, a little bit from Gaza, even though it was really tricky logistically. And there's the Paris Peace Forum. I was in Paris last month with this. It was supposed to be before Macron was having the peace conference in the UN. He collected hundreds of civil society actors and actresses in Paris. There were 500 of us there, Israeli and Palestinian. helping prepare for this peace conference. It was like, wow, so inspiring. But the second day we were there, the war started in Iran, which Faravaz will talk about. And so it kind of like broke the whole thing, but it's still going to happen. It's still happening. And one of the greatest things about the peace conference was the presence of women. First of all, it was the presence of Israeli and Palestinians together, that there was a very strong emphasis on that kind of diversity, but also on gender diversity. We at the Forum 1325 worked really, really, really hard. The head of the 1325 worked so hard to make sure that there were women in positions of, it was not easy. Let me tell you, it was really, really not easy, but we were there and our presence was felt very strongly. And the presence of women, you know, in front of a microphone, you know, speaking and leading and directing and bringing perspectives, that was new. That was really new. And it was really bringing, you know, there's a bunch of us from Forum 1325 and in Paris. And of course, what I mentioned earlier is the All MEP women's leadership. All MEP were the ones who really organized the Paris Peace Conference, and they're just amazing. Naveen Sanduka, she's the head of the Women's Leadership Network. She spoke in Paris, and wow, just wow. If you ever, we interviewed her. I interviewed Naveen so far twice on my podcast, and I just love her. I just love her, and I love everything that she's doing. And these things bring me hope. So even though, you know, we're silenced and we're scared and we have disagreements and maybe some people aren't going far enough, and I heard criticism, Aida, for sure, and I try to also represent that and understand that we have work to do for sure. What I do want to say is I think something's happening. It just feels like some new things are happening. And so I just want to, you know, give strength. I want to highlight that here in front of all of you to say, we're here, we exist, we're doing this work. We're certainly not in the majority. We're certainly not in the mainstream, but we're talking, and we're finding our power and we're working and yeah, that's it. And this is Qadir Hani, one of the most amazing peace activists you'll ever meet. And anyway, that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alana. That was very interesting. We learned a lot. I think I can speak for everybody saying that. And so now we'll go on to the presentation of Elena Kleiber-Kogan, which is speaking to us from Costa Rica. She's an anthropologist who lived and worked in Gaza for over 12 years. Her fieldwork became the foundation of her book, Gaza sans sortir, a powerful account of daily survival under siege. She will now offer us a unique, grounded perspective on Gaza, human resilience, and political violence. So thank you, and you can go, Elena.
Well, after those two presentations, Aida, thank you for sharing. Very powerful, I was on the verge of crying a number of times, I have to say. Elena, thank you for your trust. Thank you for your sincerity and for the hope, especially. And that is really the hope I'm sharing with my friends in Gaza. But I want to give you a different presentation, and I will be trying to adapt some of the things to what my two colleagues have already presented. I spent in Gaza around 20 years of my life. I have been in the Middle East around 40. I'm not Palestinian, of course, but my feeling and my constant contact with them allows me to speak about it, about the experience of Gazans. And since I am not sure that you have a context about Gaza, the rest, maybe the audience, I will begin by saying that Gaza is known for the women that have been always at the forefront of resistance. After the first Intifada, 1987, the second Intifada, 2000, the number of Israeli jails men in Israeli jails increased by thousands. Then came Oslo in 1993, and there was a slow reduction of permits of men going to Israel. It dwindled. There were very, very few. And it stopped completely, really, after when Hamas gained the legislative elections in 2006. Women realized that they had to come to terms with a new reality and that they had to really find ways to manage the man in the house and to look for help and support in NGOs and work. So there was a repositioning of gender roles that was forced by the situation and that I was observing if it was going to be a permanent thing when the war came. So all this introspection was halted. But I also want to speak about storytelling, not as a pastime, not as an entertainment, but as a resistance instrument for people in Gaza. Because storytelling has become always a way in which the people show their steadfastness and their agency by cultivating a discourse that expresses the yearning for their home country, the village or the city where they would eventually return. And it was really the story of the old Nakba, the first Nakba of 1948. But since the October 7th of 2023, the war of wars, the war like no other, like my friends describe it here, broke out. And when Israelis ordered Gaza City residents to leave the south, a supposedly safe place, many of my friends refused to leave because they had already been displaced many times and they did not want to do it again. They felt that the experience of the refugee was once more time enforced on them. They were remembering very much the experience of the founding pillar of their life in Gaza refugees, the Nakba. And nobody could imagine a horrific war as the current onslaught. Until October 2023, there was a collective narrative made up of individual stories. Gazans had been able to provide their own accounts when they spoke of the Nakba. It was an existential event that provided a narrative for their identity, as 2/3 of Gazans are refugees. The current assault entailed more displacement, even inside Gaza, the loss of loved ones, and it becomes the second Nakba, the second founding event. The former reality is an illusion, and the new reality with new memories it comprises will have to be forged anew. A review on a video called Offerings in the recent film Gaza from Ground Zero about a novelist in Gaza made me think about the crucial role of writers, frontline activists, or activists in creating narratives of identity, because they are envisaging an end of the war and the desperate need to develop a narrative line tying up the old with the new Nakba. Speaking with Gaza women who, like this writer, feel the imperative need of doing something, they explain that the only way to resist the stress of everyday life, to find food, to teach their children, to support friends, is by speaking, by recovering a voice that has been tied to silence, an instance refracting the collective. In many interviews I carried out in Gaza, the transformation of the gender position in a patriarchal family was amazing and very courageous. Women were not doing this out of feminism, they were doing it out of a need to survive. The major changes I saw happen after conflicts. It was the moment of everyday drama of individuals, and they had to fight against chaos and anomie. These actions were elements of their resistance that I call resilience, that constitute the crux of their behavior, going beyond the limits of the individual to become a collective force. Deciding to survive in such a context is having the agency to decide to continue doing, acting, being present with relatives and members of the community. Storytelling has been a daily pastime in Gaza before. Now it is an experience of defiance, of resistance. Having lived in Gaza for many years, I now realize the storytelling has become an essential aspect that allows for resilience in the Palestinian community. Throughout the decades, Gaza women have served as the element that hold the families together, whether by stepping in to make a living when their husbands were no longer able to provide for their loved ones, or by creating spaces in which their children's identities were formed. Mothers have a long storytelling tradition, and women also, in general, that reaches back to the times when families gather at night around the source of light and warmth. Their stories have only served as entertainment. Now they constitute an important element in making sense of the Palestinian experience and its history of violence and displacement. Today, developing a Palestinian narrative has become a matter of life and death, not for an individual, but for a whole generation of children who suffer displacement, becoming orphans and losing their early memories. The responsibility of women, writers, actors becomes imperative. Everyone that tells a story becomes an oral raconteur of a second Nakba. Amid the war and the constant attack, women as caregivers feed the children of Gazan identity and the collective memory of their people. History remains important in Gaza and is a means of sustenance when people live in constant uncertainty. Preparing for the end of the war, women think they must be ready to stand up and take on regenerative tasks. Thanks to the memories they have passed on orally, the new generations will regain possession of their history. By passing on the Palestinian narrative and the Palestinian history, they integrate the present that is imbued with the spirit of the past. In previous Israeli attacks, men have targeted mainly men. Israeli attacks put many men in prisons for many years. At this time, 70% of those killed in Israeli bombs thus far have been women and children who either perished through bombardment or were suffocated under the rubble of their destroyed homes. Only in the past few days, several feeding and reproductive clinics have been targeted. The videos shared in internet show harrowing images. Increasingly, the target of the attacks makes clear the genocidal intent of the perpetrator. I learned from UNRWA statistics that entire lineages, that is, extended families, hamules, have been annihilated, and often only 2 or 3 members of the family remain. Nicola Pratt, a political science professor at Warwick University, UK, comments that during South Africa's case against Israel at the International Court of Justice in 2024 January, an advisor stated that this is the first genocide in history where its victims are broadcasting their own destruction in the desperate and so far vain hope that the world might do something. While the scale of Israel's ongoing violence is unprecedented, it must be understood as part of Israel's broader settler colonial project and the inherent logics of erasure that underlie it. Speaking, and this is a story that I'm going to include after listening to Aida and to Elana. Speaking to a dear friend in Khan Yunis, the head of the Rafah Women's Association, she expressed her despair and her surprise and her disillusionment at the silence of Western feminists, some of which used to be in touch with her for years before the war, always expressing their sympathy. Wanting to bring her back an answer to her despair, I researched if there were any written reactions of Western feminists in the media that included the impact that the attacks are having on Palestinian women. I found a statement published by Feminist Dissent from shortly after the war. It begins with a strong condemnation of the events of October 7th. It addresses the use of Israeli women's bodies as weapons of war, with allegations of widespread sexual violence during October 7th by Hamas on Israeli women. It claims that at the time of the statement had been already debunked by several reports, and there were no survivors coming forward to confirm them. The statement decontextualizes and depoliticizes the emergence of Hamas. It validates sexual allegations against settler Jewish Israeli women at the expense of women in Gaza, and for that matter in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, who are exposed to permanent structural violence of settler colonialism and who have been killed in large number by settlers and by military forces through the years. The statement by Feminist Dissent draws a comparison, a very dangerous comparison, between colonizer and colonized women. They imply that the real threat in all this is fundamentalism, is Hamas, and not settler colonialism, apartheid, and occupation. This made clear to me the lacuna that exists in the feminist discourse about the genocidal sexual abuse of the Israeli occupation from the start of the occupation in 1967, and that has become worse with the passage of time. Most worrying, feminist Western women are espousing a position that justifies genocide and the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians and the supremacy of Jews over Palestinians and the continuous dispossession that have suffered in lives and land for the past 77 years. I began reading other articles and publications only to realize that being Palestinian is a feminist issue that is consistently obviated from Western feminist discourse. Not being a specialist in Western feminism, I cannot help but believe that after doing my research on it, that the movement needs a pause, a moment of reckoning to ponder about the contradictions and the absence of Palestine as a feminist issue on their discourse, so I can provide my friend in Khan Younis with a more positive message from Western feminism. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Elena. That was very interesting, and we learned a lot once again. Thanks you, all three of you, for your very thoughtful and interesting presentation. And last but not least, we'll now hear Farvaz, Farvaz is an exiled Iranian singer based now in Berlin. Her music fuses alternative pop with Oriental elements and is deeply shaped by her personal struggle for artistic freedom. In Iran, where women are banned from singing solo, she began performing underground and sharing her work online, actions that led to her arrest. Since fleeing the country, she has rebuilt her musical career in Germany, using her voice as a tool of resistance. She's the founder of the Rights to Sing, a nonprofit advocating for artistic freedom, and her story and music are now portrayed in the documentary My Orange Garden, a tribute to her resilience and creativity. Thank you very much, Farvaz. The floor is yours.
Hello, everybody. It was a really emotional afternoon and really empowering, of course, seeing all the men trying to destroy the world and women trying to still build the destroyed world. It's sad, but also still hopeful. It's a light in the dark. It's a little light in this dark words. I don't know if I'm good enough, like all of you beautiful people, to speak 20 minutes without not having the pinpoint it from you, but I will try my best. If I need help, I will ask you to help me and to join. As you told, I am Farovaz, Iranian singer, human rights activist. My focus is on women of Middle East, especially Iran and Afghanistan, and their problems and issues, of course. And I'm living since 2018 in exile in Germany. Some people ask me why Germany, and I say, sorry, I was not privileged enough to decide where I want to live. I got what I got. I took what I got, and I've been arrested in Iran on around 2016 because of singing, and with 50 other female singers in Iran. We were all underground singers in Iran, and we were mostly not political singers. Even just being a singer is political in Iran. But yes, and we all got the same sentence, which was 1 year of prison sentence. And I was lucky. I've been invited to Germany for a concert. I came here and I stayed. And since I'm here, I'm started to working on my own organization to support women in Iran and sometimes women in Afghanistan, because especially the female musician and singer, because this was what I really missed when I was living there. Because I think women of Iran and Afghanistan are so brave and so inspiring, and they are brave enough to create music and art, even it's a crime for them, but they are brave enough to do it and risk their life. And that's what I miss in Iran, that no one was there to support my art. Because I was ready to pay the price and be the criminal one, but they were not support, and that's why I'm trying to empower them and help them to produce music and art. And what I'm doing is I'm sponsoring. Sometimes people are donating to my organization. That's how I'm able to sponsor their art, and especially music and the singers. And I was really depressed and anxious with all happened to me. That's why I couldn't sing for a while. I was so angry. I started to be activist more than a singer. I wanted to talk, and it took some time to me bring my anger to my music, to create angry music, protest music. And that was the day when I recognized I want to sing again, because being a angry singer or an artist in my country, it's not something which exists really, because we are almost somehow forced to be a good woman and a good lady, to not to be angry, not to be loud, not to be impolite, and not to protest against whatever happening to us. And and what I want to say after a little bit of explanation about what is going on in Iran is that there is 45 years, even maybe more, that Iranian people are suppressed by Islamic laws in Iran, and social media is banned, and it's hard for the people to get the right information and to be aware about what is going on in this world. And I mean, you even cannot show any instrument in like TV station in Iran, and all the news are fake. People are having hardly access to internet because they are filtering all the different applications and websites. And I think, and as always, women were the center of the suppression. They were suppressed more than whoever else in Iran. And I think the culture in Iran and in also Afghanistan, it's a really misogynistic culture, and which works really good with Islamic Republic regime of Iran. And this both, they supported each other in a way that, like, that Iranian women doesn't have only an enemy, which is the government. They have all their own enemy there at their own home and at their own safe space, which is not safe. And there are many women getting killed every day, every month. I think maybe more than every part of this world by the man of their family members, this which we call it honor killing. And I think all this situation and all these pressures make us Iranian to hate any kind of religions, and it was so, we were so suppressed that every little even fake hope could like give us a little bit light of to think maybe it might change. And also Iranian women problems and all this suppression was always of course ignored by Western media. And just since the Woman Life Freedom, like which happened around 3 years ago, a little bit we hear, of course, more, which is super nice. Finally, after 45 years, women paid by their blood to finally be seen that about what is happening there. But of course, it's a female and feminist lead revolution, and it's not that important in this man world. And I think all of this created some kind of false hope on Israel from my people, and that we thought our enemy the enemy of our enemy might like us, might be our savior and wants to change our life. That's how my people, some of my, like I can say many Iranian might think in this way. And but I think after the war which happened like I think it was around a month ago, and Israel attacked Iran, and Iran attacked back, and which is again happening. I see the last 1 and 2 days, I see a lot of bombing again in Iran, and that's why a lot of political activist thinks that might be a new start for stopping the ceasefire, and which is really scary for me as an Iranian, especially to have my family living still there. And but also now there is a conflict that Iranian a little bit becoming aware that some people are celebrating. They think this war might save their life and finally make our country free. And like for example, the German president was telling Israel doing the dirty job. He told something really stupid, that Israel doing the dirty job which the whole world had to do for until now and destroy the Islamic Republic. And now we have to clap and proud to see that Israel doing it. And that's my question is then why the whole of this 45 years, nobody of you stopped negotiating with these bastard killers, and now you are clapping for Israel to go and attack Iran. And this is like, for me, I cannot understand this. And I mean, I'm not a politician. I'm just an artist to try to speak up as much as I can, because sometimes it's important, I think, that people hear and listen to things from artists, because maybe we are more funny people. I don't know why, but I think art is freedom, and art is political, and art is an easier language to speak about problems, and maybe more understandable for bigger crowds, and because we are doing it in a colorful and or more in an entertaining way. And I believe the community of the feminist community or activist community, I don't want to put it on us, but also I think we could do better. I think there could be a lot of more art created to show the solidarity between us Iranian women, Palestinian women, and Israeli women, and to just like we are in this room all together to talk about how to save this world and how we love each other and how we care for each other. And we are not part of this violence which is happening in this world. And I think we have the chance to make it louder, to bring it more in the center of attention that we are not part of it. We poor people, we don't want this, and we actually want to stop it. But I think as I was looking on social media, like I didn't see as much as I wanted to see that the artists or the people who have more money or more power to be to feel responsible, to feel supportive enough to help, that it can grow more and we could have more pieces of art to speak about it. I myself tried to talk to so many Palestinian and Israeli artists to create a collaboration, to do a concert, but I never been supported. But I don't put it on artists, of course. I put it on the people who are having the power to support this kind of projects. But yeah, in Farsi we say you ever the time you catch the fish will be fresh. Doesn't matter when, and of course we can do it. I hope that we can do it at the least in the near future. Not I can do it. There are so many amazing artists can make art, and to share more about that we are not enemy of each other, because I see sometimes in Iran people think Palestinians are our enemies because our government supports Hamas, for example, and that's why we think, okay, then the people of Palestine, they're our enemies, and okay, Netanyahu is attacking and hating our government, and that's why the Israeli people might be our friends, which is all wrong in my opinion. I think we are people all want peace, and we all want to live we want to have our basic rights and to not be killed, to live our life, uh, and uh, and also as we talked before, like I see in this kind of conflict sometimes a male politician using feminist slogan to show that, to tell at least, to fake that their war creating, their violence they are bringing to this world is because of supporting women or feminist revolution, which is, for me, sounds really silly, and it's a big lie, of course, because we cannot be feminist, we cannot care about women and then kill women and children and humans. This is not something possible. At always, we hear always from at the end of the, because Netanyahu giving a lot of speeches for Iranian people, giving us a lot of lecture about how he wants to come and save us. And he's always using woman life freedom, even in Farsi, to show that how he loves us. And I think some people could be fooled and believe in this, and this is our job, or we are forced to do this job at least, to speak up and tell that we know that you're lying, and that's not something you ever care for, and you will care, of course, in the future. And what else I can tell you? Anyway, I talk about maybe a little bit about my music. I released my first album finally after 35 years, which called Azadi, means freedom in Farsi, which I also tattooed my name of my album on my hand. And here's my album, you can see it. And it's 11 protest angry songs are in this album, and I'm really proud of it. And I'm doing a lot of concerts these days, living my dreams. And it's sad that I had to flee from my country, leave my family and friends, and live in exile and being a refugee in a shitty country which I don't like to live in, and which called Germany. And but I'm always really grateful to myself that I'm still alive and I'm still thinking. And I think just what we can do is what I can do, and what I think, in my opinion, is important to keep the art movement going on, to keep it alive. And because that's all we got um, in this mad, dark world. Maybe art, maybe music, maybe painting can save us, maybe can speak up, and maybe change people, and maybe give people hope, which we all really need these days, because this world is a really scary world, in my opinion. And we need hope, we need the moment of happiness, we need empowerment to continue our way. We need vacation, we need good food, otherwise we cannot survive. And during the time we are fighting, we are human, and we need to keep ourselves still shining on this stage which called life. And yeah, that's what I wanted to tell. I'm so proud of all of you, and I'm so happy, and I feel so privileged and honored to be part of this, if we can call it event or panel discussion. That's absolutely my luck, and it's a great chance I got. And I hope things change as fast as it's possible, because everything is too slow when it wants to turn to the better direction, because it's in the hand of the man. And I think since they are having the power, things gonna be really slow for us. But all we can do is just to continue. Thank you so much. I'm happy to talk more if you have any question or whatever, or if you think I missed something to talk about.
Thank you very much, Barabas. That was very moving and very interesting perspective that you gave us on Iran and your own experience. And we will all, well, at least I will go listen to your album as soon as we're done here. And congratulations on it once again.
And I wish for a tour. That's one of my dreams, to play in Israel, in Palestine, in Syria. I really want this one day. And
We have to work on that. Yes, yes, it's one of my dreams too.
Me too. Yeah, I hope one day it happens.
Well, we'll all work on that. And so from now on, we'll open the floor to any questions. So if you have any questions, you can write them out on the chat or even just just open up your mic and ask any questions there. And I'd like to thank you all once again for your incredible presentations and your very moving stories and
Is there
knowledge
room for
that
us
you
to
shared with us.
respond, to like comment on each other? Can we
Yes,
do
of
that?
course, of course.
Yeah, okay. So like I have two things that are coming up for me. So first of all, Farvaz, congratulations on your new album. Super excited. I follow you and you're amazing and I love your protests and everything you do and everything you stand for. And yeah. And I also wanted to say that one of the last things you talked about was how you said that a lot of times male, patriarchal, violent leaders will adopt language that sounds like language of, oh, I'm doing this for you. I'm doing this for you. I'm looking after you and all of that. And it's such a lie. It's such a like toxic, abusive stance. It is the stance of like the abusive, you know. So one of the things that I really would like to do also is spend more time unpacking this and providing tools for people to unpack this and say, oh no, 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 no. I mean, it's not just Netanyahu. I mean, Trump does it too, and like lots of they pretend, they make it sound like they package it in this language of, oh, I'm doing this for the women. And it takes sometimes like it just takes skills and work to like unpack that in your brain. So I just wanted to say that and thank you for pointing that out. It was very cringeworthy listening to Netanyahu say that. It was like he's like, "Oh, I'm here to protect the Iranian people," and it's like, what planet are we on? Like, what reality are we in?
The more crazy thing is that, as I told you before, that Iranian uh, television opposition inviting him to talk and tell to the people how good is he and how he cares for us. And
While we're bombing them, what?
yeah,
I saw the video of
same
these
time.
television stations being bombed. Oh, we're bombing you, and oh, let me tell you how great we are for you. I mean, it's this like mind twisting thing, but like again, it takes work for us to understand how to talk back to this. To learn how to talk back to this stuff. It's really.
Anyway, we had this war like around a week in Iran, and it was so painful, so sad, and it was such a tough time for everybody. I cannot imagine how it is to be a Palestinian and having this shit going for such a long time. I even cannot think about this. And I just hope this shit ends. I just really hope.
Did I say one more thing that's coming up for me? That was coming up. Or
Yeah,
no, you want like somebody else to talk? I don't want to dominate.
no, that's all right. We just have Edme, which you raised your hand. Do you want to ask a question? Please, you have the floor.
Oh, the hand raising tool. Okay, sorry, I'll use the hand raising tool. Yes, sorry. Okay, sorry.
I actually had a question for Ilana. But first, I really want to say, Faravaz, I can't imagine how hard it is to be exiled from your country, to have to leave the country you love and you would have rather not leave. I cannot imagine how difficult that is. Ilana, I'm really curious because I don't have contact with Israeli feminists, and I'm really interested in knowing and hearing a bit more about how you envisage peace. Because I saw that you had been in the Paris conference, the one you just discussed, and I noticed it was written the two-state solution, and that really just overwhelmed me because for me, as a Palestinian in East Jerusalem, under occupation, the two-state solution is anything far from peace or justice. And it's very hard to think that if at the end, all this Israeli feminist movement that wants change, that wants peace, the peace doesn't look at all the country as one state, but actually wants to divide it as two. I mean, you have Palestinians living in Tul Karam, which is in front of Netanya, which is about just 20 kilometers from the sea, who live on the humidity, who go out on the roof and they see the sea, but they've never set foot in the sea or in Jerusalem or in Al-Aqsa, which is one of the most important places for us. That was really sad for me, because if the only hope of this Israeli movement is a two-state solution, that's not peace or justice or decolonization or liberation.
Yeah, totally. So the Forum 1325, which is this coalition of women's women's activists and representative of organizations, we always say there are at least 4 different solutions that are out there, right? The two-state solution is the one that's like most known or talked about in the like diplomatic, circle over there. The calling it a conference for the two-state solution did not come from us. That came from Macron and his people, and also a couple other people he was working with. There were a couple of pairs, actually 2 pairs of men, okay, who are very into promoting that two-state solution. We actually argued with them about this because we didn't want it to be just a two-state solution. We also, first of all, because we know that there are at least 4 different solutions. There's a two-state solution, there's the binational solution, there's the federalism solution, and there's a confederation solution. I'm a fan of a land for all, of Rula Hardal and Mai Sandak, who but again, it's not my job. This is the other thing. I don't think it's my job to say this is what the solution should be. My job is to say there are solutions and there are partners. And I also don't believe it's my job to come with like prerequisites and to say, oh, this is the solution we have to be, leaning towards. Well, before we sit into a room, I think that's wrong. I mean, I think it's a wrong way to go into negotiations in general. We should be going in there and saying, let's find out solutions and let's do it based on needs, and, that's actually very, like the nonviolent communication. There's a lot about this, about how, you start these conversations with discussions about needs and desires and fears and all those kinds of things. So, that whole two-state solution thing, it wasn't what the Forum 1325 wanted it to be. It actually, some women didn't come. Some women who are not in favor of the two-state solution didn't come for that reason. And also because it was a little too like inflexible. It was not very, it wasn't very it wasn't an approach that said, oh, dialogue. Now, but I do think that during the conference itself, there were a lot of discussions about the points you raised, about how it's not really it. There are too many issues that it ignores, and it's really like what you were talking about. There were a lot of discussions about how everybody needs access to the areas that they feel are sacred to them. I mean, you talked about the beach, which is also. So there was in the groups, in the policymaking groups, there were 8 policymaking groups, and in these groups there were discussions about this. I don't know personally what I would advocate. I also don't really like the two-state solution. I'm much personally. I mean, I'm just telling you personally, it's not the stance. The stance of Forum 1325 is there are at least 4 or more solutions, and we have to come together and discuss them and figure out what works based on what people want and need. Okay, and based on people's dignity and human rights, and need for autonomy, and need for security, and need for freedom and justice, and all of those things. That's my personal yeah. And me personally, I feel like I would like to live in a place where all human beings are here, and all human beings who live here have the exact same rights. And that's one of the things that I write about in my book at the end, is that I think, and again, this is just like me talking, me personally, is that I would like us meaning like Jews and Israelis, to redefine our thinking about what a Jewish state means, because Israel is so much called the Jewish state, and so many people who are advocates for a Jewish state don't understand that what that means. Like, a Jewish state that you're describing means a state for just Jews. Like, what are you going to do with people who aren't Jewish? They're just going to cease to exist, or what? Or we're going to keep using force or violence? Are they less human beings? And I would like to have that discussion. And I would say, that is not sustainable. It is not moral. And also, from my perspective, as somebody who is a religious observant Jew for most of my life, it also is not Jewish for me, because Judaism at its core is about love thy neighbor, we're all human beings, compassion for your neighbor. For me, Judaism has at its core values of compassion and seeing all human beings as human beings. So to envision that kind of Jewish state completely negates what is, for me, core Judaism. Core Judaism says we're all human beings. Also in the Bible, like when we, 3,000 years ago, or whatever, it was 2,000, when Jews came to this land, the Israelites came to this land, we were told to be kind to the stranger. 36 times in the Bible, it says, be kind to the stranger. Treat your stranger meaning like non-Jew, like, ger, like non-Jew. And so what are we doing? Like, what are we doing here? So for me, I would like my Jewish people to redefine what it means to be a Jewish state. And that Jewish state doesn't mean majority Jews, demography, all those demographic conversations, which are just like appalling and so inhumane and just so wrong. Replace all that with a Jewish state meaning a state of Jewish values. And the core Jewish value is all human beings are human beings. And let's figure out how to make it a Jewish state so that all people who live here have the same rights. Just as I want to be respected for my Judaism, I want to be able to celebrate my holidays and be with my family and speak my language and sing my songs and eat my food and move around and be with the people I want to be with and go to my family's weddings and go to the beach with my family. I want that. I want everybody else to have that exact same experience, to be able to celebrate their holidays, whatever they are. And we should all wish each other happy holiday, whatever your holiday is, and speak each other's languages. And you go to the beach when you want to with your family, and I'll go to the beach with my family when I want to. That's what I envision. Okay, that's my dream. Whatever. It's a lot of steps to get there. But you asked me what my opinion is, and that's where. Anyway, I'm sorry for speaking so long. I know that was a really long answer, but it's a really important point. I mean, your point is totally on point. Yes.
Yeah, thank you both for this interesting conversation on the solutions and all the different kinds of propositions that they are, because it's I think a very important thing to discuss. Edme, you had a question. Please do ask the
Yes.
question.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I missed the beginning because I just missed there's an hour difference with Morocco, and I'm still in Morocco. And I was wondering, I heard a little bit of Elena's presentation, and I was a little bit intrigued and wanted to know more of her position of Western feminism regarding the situation, Israel-Palestinian situation, because it was not so clear to me. I also want to say this is a wonderful conversation, and I'm also belong to White Plus, and we hope that we can entertain more webinars like this one, which was fantastic that Mylene could organize it, because these are conversations that are needed very much, especially between Western feminists, and we have a lot of feminists within White Plus, and all the feminists in Iran, in Palestine, in Israel, and also to our Palestinian Iranian presenter. I want to say that you are right. We need to have more solidarity with Iranian women. I was at the Feminist Forum, which is the biggest forum for Latin American women every 4 years. Last year, 1.5 years ago, and there was solidarity for many things, but not for Iranian women, which really, I thought, why are we missing this? And I think it has to be more internationalized. Thank you.
You want me to respond? Is that a question?
Mylene, can I
Elena,
yes,
Oh,
please.
Elena,
I have
Elena, not me. Okay.
3 quick points. First of all, Farabas, more power to you. Good luck, and we will be following you. One point on what Ilana mentioned, you spoke about this two-state solution, your opinion, and you spoke about rights access. I just want to add a technical specification as an academician who has been studying about these possibilities. There is something called de-development that has been coined by Sarah Roy years ago, that started in 1967, when Israel consistently made the effort to erode any possibility of development of Palestine, especially Gaza. So the two-state solution it's absolutely not viable because there is no other state that could be autonomous. That's one point. The other thing is that I find amazing that you and Ida are in the same city and you are meeting on Zoom. It would be great if you can meet physically, and that way you can discuss, because it's something that happens a lot in Jerusalem, I have to say. You live there, and sometimes you just meet this virtual way. And the thing about Edme, what I have noticed about Western feminism is discussing with my Gaza friends, my Gaza women, is that they do feel like I do, that they really, they forget that there is something about Palestine. And I have not found, and if you have any publication that speaks about the issue of Palestinian feminism, then please share it with me, because now that I am in Costa Rica, I realize that Costa Ricans, in that sense, the women, are very much aware of that need to include the analysis of the impact of the pain and the destruction and the different abuses of women in Palestine. So please, Edme, I would appreciate that. And yes, we definitely have to make it more international for Iranian and for also for women in Afghanistan. I have been in touch with a lot of this because I belong to a platform which is the Center for Competence and Humanitarian Negotiation. So I have been a lot following up with the Iranian and with the women from Afghanistan. But the norm is not to know anything about you. So that's important. Over to you. Thank you, Mylan.
Thank you very much. That was very interesting, and I think that discussing the bias of Western feminism is very important. But I think that on a grassroots level, there are still publications or taken into account, or even how do you say that, protests by Western feminists for Palestine. The only issue is that there is institutional backlash, if we could say that. For example, we talked about Macron earlier, who said for quite some time that he would recognize Palestine before backing out. So there is this difficulty, and also the repression of the protests and a lot of different cities, and as they're deemed as anti-Semitic. But that is a whole different issue about Western feminism and their bias.
Another webinar.
Yeah.
But there is a question for Ilana in the chat.
Yeah.
Did you see that,
About
Ilana?
this, yeah. So, so I see we're getting into the subject of like different types of feminism and weaknesses of certain feminism, and a lot of criticism of Western feminism and liberal feminism, and that's real. I mean, this criticism is real, the limitations of Western and I say that as someone who probably participated in that for a while. I didn't grow up in a feminist household. I grew up in a very, very patriarchal, very, very religious, conservative family. We were a family of all girls, and in our house, feminism was like satanic. It was like feminists are ruining the world and all of that. I did not grow up to think that I could have a career. I grew up with a place where like women don't touch money, and women are supposed to be perky and skinny and smiley and thin and mothers and not ambitious. And so there was a lot of like, there was discovering feminism in my mid 20s was like part of a whole process of peeling back layers of a lot of things. So for me, that Western feminism it was Jewish feminism. It was Jewish Orthodox feminism. I was like fully concentrating on my own particular context, my own particular oppressions that I had to really unravel, and it took me a long time. So it took me a while to get to this place also of also understanding that I have to look beyond my own experience and other people's experiences. And again, this is something that I keep coming back to, which is that unraveling our cultures is a process. Learning how to resist the cultures that formed us is a process, and it's not always easy. And and sometimes it takes time, and sometimes we get so busy figuring out our own issues that it takes us another minute to say, oh, wait a second, there's something over there too also that I should be paying attention to. Not that I'm trying to excuse, I'm not trying to excuse, like the racism that exists in a lot of feminism. It's real and it's painful. And, I encounter a lot of painful things in feminist circles also, and it's not just one feminism. There are many, many, many feminisms. And sometimes these things are painful. And I try to, personally, I'm just saying what I do personally is I'm trying to balance my desire to build sisterhood solidarity around shared values with also the need to sometimes express criticism. Sometimes you have to be critical, especially today with like the issues of Gaza. Not all the feminist groups that have formed since October 7th are talking about the women and children in Gaza. It's true. I didn't bring up the ones that didn't because I didn't, the ones that I brought up here are the ones that are, but not everybody is. I can't have that conversation with everybody with ease, so that's hard and that's challenging. At the same time, we have to find the shared values, and we have to like keep speaking it, keep at it, just keep at it, just keep at it. I want to say something else. Can I say something else about this thing about like the limitations of feminism? Limitations of feminism, limitations to feminist solidarity, challenges of feminist solidarity. So like I've been hearing a lot in our conversations today, why aren't these feminists doing this? And why aren't these feminists doing enough? And if you're not going to do this, then you're not a good enough feminist and all that. And I hear it all the time. It's not just Palestinian criticism, like it's also, also Jewish criticism. Like, a lot of Jewish feminists are critics of Western feminism who didn't speak out enough about the sexual assault on October 7th. So it's exactly the same thing. Why did UN Women not speak out about sexual assault that Hamas used on October 7th? So I'm hearing like that same language coming at me from all directions. Why aren't feminists more like this? And why aren't feminists standing up for this? And so I have to say that I've been hearing that kind of sentence for 30 years. Like there are a lot of things that we could say. If you are a real feminist, then you would be X. If you want to be a real feminist, then you can't be married, hetero. You can't, wear lipstick. You can't wear high heels. You can't be you have to be a vegan. You can't eat animals. You can't make money, or there are a lot of things that a lot of people will say. Like if you're a real feminist, then you have to also do this. Which I get, and I also feel it, especially about this issue with Gaza right now. Like, women who aren't speaking out about what's going on in Gaza, it's really hard. Okay, it's really, really hard. At the same time, I feel like I don't want to do litmus tests. I feel like in the long run, the litmus tests are like not really a helpful discourse. That whole, well, if you are a real feminist, then you'll do this. I just feel like it's not a helpful conversation. I feel like we have to find better ways. I have to find better ways to do this. It's hard sometimes, like when I'm in different groups, we have these conversations about like the occupation. And, there's a woman who I work with who really does not want to talk about the occupation. She's like, we can't talk about the occupation. It's nothing. And I'm sort of like, I push back all the time, and it's hard because I want to be an ally with her and I want to work with her on things. And so these things are complicated, Anyway, I don't know if that exactly answered the question you're asking about multiple feminisms, but it's basically, it's intersectional feminism, and it's about recognizing our complex identities and figuring out how to allow the space for the complex identities at the same time that we speak up for ourselves and speak up for the things that we think are crucial to our feminism. It's a dance. It's a little bit of a dance. What can I say? Was that a cop-out? It might have been a cop-out.
Thank you, Ilana, very much. And Ida, you wanted to say something?
Yes, because I already have Ilana here, and although Jerusalem is small, we don't know when we will be meeting. So I have just
I do want to invite you to my podcast. I'm not in Jerusalem, actually. I'm in Modi'in, but I would absolutely love for you to come onto my podcast. We'll talk about it afterwards. Yes, I would love that. Okay.
I just have a quick question, because we were talking about how the two-state solution, for me, is not an option because it's not just, it's not fair, It does not mean liberation of the Palestinian people or the liberation of Palestine. And I also heard your insistence on the idea of a Jewish state. And although I can respect it, at the same time, it's very hard to see that religion, this is being used as supremacy. Yani, we are the people beneath, we are under occupation for 77 years. We have been exiled, we are refugees, we are more than 3 million in the diaspora. We cannot return our own land, which we own, which is written in our name. We cannot build on because of the laws present in this country. As a Palestinian woman, I have never felt as if a man had power over my life. I grew up in a very feminist family without even knowing it was feminist, because my father and mother are feminists without the Western concept. This is something we have inherently in our family. And we can trace our lineage in Jerusalem to over 1,300 years. So if we want to talk about a one-state solution that talks about a Jewish state as a Jewish state, what are we? That makes us immediately second-class citizens. And I'm not even a citizen, I'm a resident in this country. And if I leave the country for 7 years, I lose my ID, I can't come back. And I own land, I own a lot of land, and that doesn't give me any right to stay or build or anything. So when I hear the idea of, for me, a one-state solution, so I can be very clear what I imagine that to be, it's a one state where we do not kick out Israelis or Jews. It's a one state where it's secular and everyone has equal rights. And we go on to form a government that's equal. Because anything less than that, I know you are the winners in this war. We all know that. But even though there is justice and there is overpowering the weak, and there is the colonizer and there is the colonized. And we know you have global support. We don't. And we have a very corrupt representation, which represents us in the EU, represents us in the UN. These people do not represent us. The Palestinian government does not represent us. So how can a Jewish state give equal rights if it's called a Jewish state? That is my question.
Yeah. So first of all, I want to say that I think we share the vision. Forget the title for a second. Forget my use of that phrase, the Jewish state, just for a second. Our vision is basically the same. Okay? I share your vision. My use of the term Jewish state was more of like to sort of like speak to my own people who, to help us evolve our concepts of things. It was certainly not to say there should be a place where Jews dominate and continue to colonize. No. No. That's not what I meant. What I meant is Jewish as a place where Jews have a safe haven. Okay, because that's why Jews decided to do this. Jews needed a safe haven. Jews were struggling with anti-Semitism and pogroms and Holocaust and all kinds of things. And so the vision for a Jewish state, in that concept when Jews were, sitting in ghettos and imagining, Jewish state meant safe haven for Jews. So that is the part of Jewish state that I still hang on to, right? I want a place where Jews are safe. I want that state to also be a place where Palestinians are safe. The exact same thing that I want for myself, I want for every single other person who's here. That's it. And that for me, that is the beginning and the end of what Jewish state would mean for me in my ideal situation, which is that it's a place where Jews are safe to pray, to worship, to get together, to gather, to move, to celebrate, to talk, to have babies, to all of those things. And every single other person here has the exact same rights. That's the whole thing. That's the whole thing. But getting to that place. So Jews listening to this, if I have like Jewish friends listening to this, I can already hear the uproar. Like, oh, you see, you're talking about the destruction of the Jewish state. All right. So you didn't say the destruction of the Jewish state. You said you would not kick out anybody. So like I heard you say that. And so there is no destruction of the Jewish state. There is no destruction of Jews in your vision or mine. Okay. So it's not that, but I know how these conversations work in my world, so I know how these work. So that's why when I'm saying these things, I'm saying it as like a sort of like encouraging of my people and my culture to use our imagination and reconnect with our humanity. That's how I use the phrase. Certainly not as a tool of domination. I do not want that. It's not good for your people, and it is also not good for our people. I don't want to be that person. I don't want to do that. I don't want to. That's not our future. It's not sustainable, and it's not moral. It's not Jewish. I don't want it. So,
I appreciate your answer. I'll quickly answer Gaya's question regarding suggestions for a counter narrative or specific points to raise to change the mind of people in power or in majority that sustain the current political choice. Unfortunately, well, my background is in international law and human rights and political science. So when I look at what's happening in Palestine, I realize the issue is much bigger than Netanyahu, much bigger than the corrupt Palestinian government we have, much bigger than all this. And it's a very wide geopolitical issue, and power is not concentrated in one place. And we all see how many companies are profiting from the genocide, how many are profiting from apartheid, even before bombing Gaza. So the idea of a counter narrative to fight against all this money that's coming in from the genocide is very hard, because we're talking about very big powers that aren't really interested in the opinion of even their own people, because we're seeing very big protests in the US, in the UK, in Germany, which are being faced with a lot of violence, and in Latin America, everywhere. But we are seeing, this is what actually the war in Gaza demonstrated to everyone, that this democracy, the idea of democracy in the West is not real, it's fake. They don't have democracy in the US, they don't have democracy in Berlin, nor Paris, nor Spain the most, because they have really a strong pro-Palestine stance, and they are sanctioning Israel, but many other governments are not. So this illusion of democracy is really, the curtain fell with the genocide. And thinking that people have power over their governments is starting to show that no, they don't. So what can really be the counter narrative? I can't see one at this point, because even I, who was so hopeful and who really believed in the one-state solution and who thought we could all live together, I am now at a loss, because this was my thesis for my dissertation, and now I don't even believe in it. And this is me, someone who considers myself very open-minded, who accepts everything. Even I don't have the energy to believe in a one-state solution anymore. After so much merciless killing, after so much pain and the humiliation, it's just unbearable. The amount of humiliation, there's a limit one can take. And we go through it daily. In my daily life, when a police officer stops me, when I decide while I'm walking my dog to stop and stand with a Palestinian man who's being frisked and searched, because it's my right, and they come tell me, no, you're not allowed to stand here, please go. And I stay, because I won't leave a fellow Palestinian alone to be harassed. But even I, one person alone, what can I do? And if I didn't look like this, would I have been able to do something like that? No. If I were a man, they would have taken me next to the guy on the car and frisked me with him. And if I were veiled, how would that reaction be? But I realize the privilege also that I have within the occupation. But at the same time, it's very hard to imagine a counter narrative. If in the West people are being oppressed this way, imagine here. What can really be the counter narrative to all these powerful forces that are really oppressing Palestinians and feminist Israelis who are trying to fight for the end of occupation, and Iranian women and the men who stand with them? It's so much bigger than just you and I and a group of feminist women. It has to come to the point where governments sanction Israel and hurt them economically. Unless that happens, nothing will change, and the genocide will not stop, because everyone is profiting from it. The people who matter are profiting. So the counter narrative, what can that be? That's something that will take a lot of time. And until no one stands up for us, no one sanctions Israel, no one does anything that will actually hurt financially, nothing can change. Because our corrupt government, the Palestinian government, that does not represent me in any way, is also profiting. So if our own people are profiting from our misery, imagine people outside. I hope that kind of answered the question.
Thank you, Aida, for this clarity and for warning us against what we have been seeing for a long time now, but that there is still no valuable response to it. So I think we will wrap up now. Thank you all for joining us. Is there any words that the speakers would like to give us? Any sort of concluding remarks or anything? Yes, Parvez?
Just a second. And that would be nice if somehow we can get all the access to the social media of the people, because then we can follow and support and get to know each other more. Also maybe the people who are listening to us. Thank you for listening to us. I hope it was not boring for you. And a big love and solidarity I send, I think, from all of us to Ida, because I think she's in the hardest position more than all of us, at least for now, unfortunately. And I hope things change in a better way. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Farvas. Thank you, everybody. And
Thank you for having us, and really great meeting all of you. And I hope to continue our conversation. I really feel like we're more in the middle than at the end. So I'm really so grateful to meet you, and I look forward to continuing.
Oh my.
thank you all. And well, thank you for your insights, your conversation, and see you all soon. We will be posting this webinar on the internet. If you haven't seen all of it, that way you can. And we will also be posting a statement and posting it on social media. So please keep in touch with White Plus and with all the organizations of this amazing people, and thank you all very much.